My parents demanded I return the Christmas gift they'd given me because my sister liked it better, even though I'd already moved out and paid my own bills for years. I asked calmly, "So you're actually punishing me for being independent and successful?" My mom just said coldly, "Family always comes first, before your selfish needs," while pouring scalding hot soup over my face and hair. Dad joined in menacingly, "Give it back right now or something much worse will be pouring down too." Sister smirked triumphantly, finally getting what I've always deserved. I replied with a calm smile, "Then you'll perfectly understand why I'm cutting all ties forever and pressing criminal charges." What happened after that changed everything. I'm 28, and I've been financially independent since I was 22. While my younger sister Eliza, 25, still lives at home, works part-time at a coffee shop, and has our parents pay for her car, phone, and basically everything else, I've built a successful career as a software engineer. I have my own apartment, car, and I've been saving for a house. I love my independence, but apparently, that's been a problem for my family. Growing up, Eliza was always the golden child. She was the baby, the creative one, the one who needed more support. Meanwhile, I was expected to be responsible, help out, and never complain. Classic oldest child syndrome, right? But I thought things would change as we became adults. Spoiler alert, they didn't. This all started 3 weeks before Christmas last year. My parents, Nadine and Malcolm, invited me over for an early Christmas celebration since Eliza would be visiting our Aunt Miriam in another state during the actual holiday. I was excited because we hadn't done family Christmas in a while, and I'd gotten everyone really thoughtful gifts. When I arrived at their house that Saturday afternoon, the atmosphere felt weird. Eliza was being unusually sweet to me, which should have been my first red flag. She kept complimenting my hair, my outfit, asking about my job with fake interest. My parents seemed tense, but I figured it was just holiday stress. We exchanged gifts after dinner. I gave my parents a beautiful photo album filled with family memories I'd compiled and printed professionally. For Eliza, I'd gotten a high-end art supply set since she was always talking about wanting to get back into painting. Everyone seemed happy with their gifts. Then came my turn. My parents handed me a small wrap box with proud smiles. Inside was a stunning vintage Cartier watch, clearly expensive and absolutely gorgeous. It had belonged to my great-grandmother, and my mom had apparently been saving it to give to one of us. "Oh my God, this is incredible," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you so much. I'll treasure this forever." Eliza's face immediately changed. The fake sweetness vanished, replaced by barely concealed jealousy. "Wow, that's really nice," she said through gritted teeth. I should have known something was up when my parents exchanged glances. But I was so happy with the gift and the gesture that I didn't think much of it. The next few days were normal. I wore the watch to work and got compliments on it. I felt connected to my great-grandmother, whom I'd adored as a child. It was honestly one of the most meaningful gifts I'd ever received. Then, exactly 1 week later, my mom called. "Hannah, we need to talk about the watch," she said without preamble. "What about it?" "I love it, Mom. Thank you again." "Well, Eliza has been thinking, and she really feels like the watch should go to her instead." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Eliza thinks the watch would be more meaningful to her. She's always been more sentimental about family heirlooms, and she's been having a really hard time lately with her job situation." "Mom, you gave me this watch as a Christmas gift. It's mine now." "Hannah, don't be selfish. Eliza is going through a tough time, and this would really cheer her up. You have so many nice things already." I felt my blood pressure rising. I have nice things because I work for them and buy them myself. This watch was a gift from you and Dad. You can't just take back a gift because Eliza decided she wants it. We're not taking it back. We're asking you to do the right thing for your sister." "The right thing?" "Mom, I'm 28 years old. I live on my own, pay my own bills, and I've never asked you for anything. This watch was given to me as a gift, and I'm keeping it." The conversation ended with my mom saying we'd discuss this later in a tone that made it clear this wasn't over. Over the next few days, I got texts from both parents and Eliza. Dad sent messages like, "Your sister really needs this right now and family should come first." Eliza sent long paragraphs about how she'd always connected more with great-grandmother's memory and how the watch would inspire her to get her life together. I ignored them all. Then, that Friday, my mom called again. "We're having a family dinner Sunday. We need to settle this watch situation." "There's nothing to settle, Mom. It's my watch." "Hannah, just come to dinner. We'll talk about it like adults." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I thought maybe I could make them understand how unreasonable they were being. Sunday arrived, and I drove to my childhood home wearing the watch. I figured if I showed up confident and calm, they'd realize how ridiculous this whole thing was. The moment I walked in, I could feel the tension. Eliza was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, looking smug. My parents were in the kitchen, and I could hear them whispering. Dinner was awkward. Everyone was making forced small talk while shooting glances at my wrist. Finally, after we'd finished eating, my dad cleared his throat. Hannah, we need to discuss the watch situation. There's no situation, Dad. You gave me a gift. I'm keeping it. Eliza jumped in immediately. This is so typical of you, Hannah. You always get everything, and you can't stand the thought of me having something nice for once. Eliza, I work 60 hours a week and haven't asked our parents for money since I was in college. You live here rent-free and they pay for everything. How exactly do I get everything? That's not the point, Eliza snapped. This watch should be mine. I'm the one who actually cares about family history. Really? Because I spent 3 months putting together that photo album for Mom and Dad, researching dates and tracking down old pictures. What have you done lately to show you care about family history? My mom stood up abruptly. Hannah, enough. This isn't about who deserves what. This is about family, and Eliza needs this more than you do. So you're actually punishing me for being independent and successful? I asked calmly. My mom's face went cold. Family always comes first, before your selfish needs. Before I could respond, she picked up the bowl of hot soup she'd been eating and poured it directly over my face and hair. I screamed as the burning liquid hit my skin. The soup was scalding hot, and I could feel it burning my scalp and running down my neck. My eyes were watering from the pain and shock. Give it back right now, my dad said, standing up menacingly, or something much worse will be pouring down too. Through the pain and soup dripping from my hair, I looked at Eliza. She was smirking triumphantly. Finally getting what I've always deserved, she said with satisfaction. That's when something clicked in my brain. The shock wore off, and I felt this incredible calm wash over me. I looked at my parents and sister, all of them waiting for me to break down or give in, and I smiled. Then you'll perfectly understand why I'm cutting all ties forever and pressing criminal charges. The room went dead silent. I calmly walked to the bathroom, grabbed a towel, and cleaned the soup off my face and out of my hair as best I could. My skin was red and stinging, but thankfully not blistered. When I came back out, they were all still standing there looking shocked. Hannah, don't be dramatic, my mom said, but her voice wavered. It was just soup. Assault is assault, Nadine, I said, using her first name deliberately. And threatening further violence is intimidation. Malcolm, I'm sure your employer would be interested to know about this. My dad worked for a conservative financial firm that prided itself on family values and character. You wouldn't, Eliza said, but she looked scared now. Watch me. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of my red, irritated skin. Then I took a video, walking through the dining room, showing the soup splattered on the chair and floor, narrating what had just happened with a timestamp. What are you doing? My mom asked, panic creeping into her voice. Documenting evidence. I'm going to the police station after I leave here to file a report for assault and threatening behavior. Then I'm going to the hospital to document my injuries. Then I'm calling a lawyer. Hannah, let's be reasonable, my dad said, his authoritative tone completely gone. This got out of hand, but we're family. No, we're not. Family doesn't assault each other over jewelry. You stopped being my family the moment you decided Eliza's wants were more important than my basic human dignity. I started walking toward the door. Wait. Eliza called out. What about the watch? I turned back and smiled. What about it? It's mine. It was a gift. And now every time I look at it, I'll remember exactly what kind of people you all really are. I left and drove straight to the police station. The officer who took my report was incredibly kind and professional. He took photos of my injuries, collected my phone evidence, and explained the process. Because there were witnesses, even though they were the perpetrators, and clear physical evidence, he said the case was very straightforward. They issued a warrant for my mother's arrest that same evening. I also went to the urgent care clinic and had my injuries documented by a medical professional. The doctor said I had superficial burns on my scalp and face from the hot soup that could have been much worse, and she recommended over-the-counter pain relief and careful monitoring for any signs of infection. The next morning, I called in sick to work and contacted a lawyer who specialized in family law and assault cases. She was fascinated by the story and agreed to take the case on contingency. Then the fun really started. My phone started blowing up around 6 p.m. My mom had been arrested at her workplace, the elementary school where she worked as a secretary. Apparently, 2 officers showed up during the last hour of the school day and asked to speak with her privately. When they informed her of the warrant, she was escorted from the building, though thankfully most students had already been dismissed. My dad called first, screaming about how I was destroying the family and ruining your mother's career. I let it go to voicemail. Eliza called next, crying and begging me to fix this. Also went to voicemail. My mom called from jail, sobbing about how sorry she was and how she never meant to hurt me. I answered this one. You poured scalding soup on my head because I wouldn't give Eliza a watch that you gave me as a gift, I said calmly. You meant every bit of it. Hannah, please, I could lose my job over this. They've already suspended me pending the outcome of the case. Good. Actions have consequences. But your sister is an adult who can get her own job and buy her own jewelry. Goodbye, Nadine. I hung up and blocked all their numbers. But I wasn't done. Remember how my dad worked for that conservative financial firm? I called their HR department and explained that one of their employees, Malcolm Miller, had threatened to pour scalding liquid on me during a domestic violence incident where his wife had already assaulted me. I provided them with a police report number and explained that I was concerned about their company's reputation being associated with someone who threatened violence against women. They were very interested in this information. I also called the school district where my mom worked. I explained that one of their employees had been arrested for assault and that I was concerned about someone with violent tendencies working around children. I provided them with a case number and court dates. By the end of the following month, both my parents had been placed on administrative leave from their jobs pending the outcomes of their respective investigations. My dad's company moved quickly due to the nature of their business and reputation concerns, while the school district followed their standard protocol for employees facing criminal charges. Eliza, meanwhile, was having her own crisis. She'd recently quit the coffee shop to work full-time at a call center for an insurance company, a job that paid slightly better but was much more demanding. Without my parents' full income, suddenly their financial situation became very precarious. She couldn't afford to help with the lawyer fees for my mom's case, and she definitely couldn't cover the household expenses. My lawyer was amazing. She filed not only criminal charges but also a civil suit for assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and harassment. She said we had an excellent case and that the documented threats and family members as witnesses, even hostile ones, made it very strong. Before the court date, I had to deal with their increasingly desperate attempts to contact me. Even though I blocked their numbers, they found ways to reach out. My mom's sister, Aunt Carol, called me in January. Hannah, your mother is beside herself. She made a mistake, but this has gone too far. She could go to jail. She assaulted me, Aunt Carol. She poured boiling soup on my head because I wouldn't give my spoiled sister a watch that was given to me as a gift. But she's family, Hannah. She raised you, fed you, clothed you, and then she burned me. That cancels out the basic parenting she was supposed to do anyway. Aunt Carol tried the guilt trip angle. What would your great-grandmother think about you destroying the family like this? I think great-grandmother would be proud that I'm not letting people abuse me just because we share blood. She was a strong woman who didn't take nonsense from anyone. That conversation ended quickly when I told Aunt Carol I'd hang up if she called about this again. Then Eliza got creative. She created a fake Instagram account and started commenting on my posts with things like I miss my sister and family should forgive each other. I figured out it was her pretty quickly. She used the same username format she'd always used, just with different numbers. I screenshot all of her comments and sent them to my lawyer as evidence of continued harassment despite the restraining order process being underway. The most pathetic attempt came from my dad. He somehow got my work email address and sent me a long message about family honor and how I was bringing shame on the family name. He actually tried to argue that pressing charges against my mother was worse than what she'd done to me. I forwarded that email to HR and explained the situation. They were incredibly supportive and helped me set up additional security measures to prevent any workplace harassment. During this time, I also started hearing about the ripple effects of their actions through mutual acquaintances. My mom's best friend, Margaret, who had known our family for 15 years, completely cut ties with them after hearing the full story. She actually reached out to me to apologize for not recognizing the favoritism toward Eliza over the years. I always thought Eliza was just going through a difficult phase, Margaret told me over coffee. I didn't realize your parents were enabling her to the point where they'd hurt you to keep her happy. Margaret wasn't the only one. Several family friends reached out to express their shock and support. Many of them shared stories about interactions they'd had with my family that made more sense now, times when my parents had dismissed my achievements or made excuses for Eliza's behavior. One story that particularly stuck with me came from my high school friend's mom, Mrs. Patterson. She told me that at my graduation party, my parents had spent the entire time talking about Eliza's art and how worried they were about her future, barely mentioning my academic achievements or college plans. I thought it was strange at the time, Mrs. Patterson said. It was your celebration, but they seemed more concerned with making sure everyone knew how special Eliza was. These conversations were validating but also painful. It became clear that the pattern of putting Eliza first had been obvious to outsiders for years, but I'd been too close to the situation to see it clearly. Meanwhile, my parents' financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. My dad's termination had come with the loss of his health insurance and retirement contributions. My mom's suspension from the school district meant she couldn't apply for other education jobs while the case was pending. They tried to get a loan to cover legal fees, but their credit wasn't great, and banks were reluctant to lend to someone facing criminal charges. Eliza's minimum wage job at the call center barely covered her personal expenses, let alone helping with household costs. I heard through the grapevine that they'd had to sell my mom's car, the newer one, and were sharing my dad's older vehicle. They'd also canceled their cable, internet, and several other services to cut costs. Part of me, a very small part, felt a little sorry for them. But then I'd remember the feeling of that burning soup hitting my face and my dad's threatening voice, and the sympathy would disappear. My lawyer kept me updated on the legal proceedings. The prosecutor handling my mom's case was particularly thorough because domestic violence cases were a priority for their office. They interviewed several character witnesses who testified about my good nature and my family's problematic dynamics. One witness was my former college roommate, Camille, who had visited my family home several times during school breaks. She told the prosecutor about an incident she'd witnessed where my parents had given Eliza money for spring break while telling me I needed to work extra hours to pay for my own trip. It was clear that Hannah was expected to be independent while Eliza was coddled, Camille testified. But Hannah never complained about it. She just worked harder. Another witness was my neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, who had seen me helping my parents with yard work and home repairs for years while Eliza was notably absent from these activities. Hannah was always the one helping out, he told the prosecutor. Eliza would come and go as she pleased, but Hannah was reliable and respectful. It was shocking to hear that they treated her this way. The character witnesses painted a clear picture of the family dynamic and made it obvious that the assault wasn't a one-time loss of control, but the culmination of years of unfair treatment. As the court date approached, I started feeling nervous. Not about the case, I knew we had solid evidence and witnesses. But about seeing them again. I hadn't laid eyes on any of them since the soup incident, and I wasn't sure how I'd react. My lawyer suggested I write a victim impact statement to read at the sentencing if my mom was convicted. Writing it was both therapeutic and difficult. I had to relive the assault and articulate how it had affected me, but I also got to express how their behavior had impacted my entire life. The statement was powerful. I wrote about growing up feeling like I was never good enough, working twice as hard for half the recognition, and always being expected to sacrifice for Eliza's happiness. I described the physical pain of the burns, but also the emotional pain of realizing that my parents valued Eliza's wants more than my basic safety and dignity. I also wrote about the positive changes in my life since cutting them off, how much happier and more confident I'd become without their constant criticism and manipulation. Theo was incredibly supportive during this time. He helped me practice reading the statement aloud and held me when I cried afterward. He also came with me to the courthouse for moral support, even though he couldn't be in the courtroom during the proceedings. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," he told me the night before the court date. "A lot of people would have just taken the abuse to keep the peace. I used to be one of those people, I admit it. But something about that moment, seeing Eliza smirk while I was being hurt, just snapped something in me. I realized I deserved better." The first court date was in late June, a full 6 months after the incident. Criminal cases moved slowly, and there had been several postponements due to scheduling conflicts and my parents' attempts to find adequate legal representation they could afford. I took the day off work and showed up in a professional outfit with a Cartier watch prominently displayed on my wrist. My family looked terrible. My mom had lost weight and looked haggard. My dad had been terminated from his job in March after the company completed their internal investigation. My mom's suspension from the school district meant she couldn't apply for other education jobs while the case was pending. Eliza looked like she'd been crying for weeks. Their lawyer tried to argue that it was a family dispute that got out of hand and that my mom acted in a moment of emotional distress. He suggested community service and anger management classes. My lawyer countered with photos of my burns, the medical report, the video evidence, and character witnesses who testified about my respectful, professional nature and my family's history of favoritism toward Eliza. The judge was not sympathetic to the family dispute argument. She pointed out that pouring hot soup on someone's head was assault regardless of the relationship between the parties, and that my father's threats of something much worse constituted intimidation and criminal threatening. My mom pled guilty to avoid a trial. She got 6 months in jail, suspended to weekends only, so she could look for a new job, 2 years of probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a restraining order that prevented her from contacting me for 5 years. My dad was charged separately for the threats. He also pled guilty and got probation, community service, and his own restraining order. Between the criminal case resolution and the civil settlement, I had to endure a few more months of harassment attempts from extended family members who thought I should let bygones be bygones. My grandmother on my dad's side, Nana Elsie, called me in March. She was 85 and had always been the family matriarch who expected everyone to fall in line. "Hannah Marie," she said in her stern voice, "this nonsense has gone on long enough. Your mother made a mistake, but you're tearing this family apart." Nana, she didn't spill coffee on me by accident. She deliberately poured scalding soup on my head because I wouldn't give Eliza a watch that was rightfully mine. "Eliza is struggling, Hannah. She needs support right now. Eliza is 26 years old. She needs a job and some accountability, not a family heirloom that belongs to me." "You always were stubborn," Nana said with disapproval. "Just like your great-grandmother. She was too proud for her own good too." That comment actually made me smile. "Thank you, Nana. I'll take that as a compliment." She huffed and hung up, but not before telling me I was breaking your mother's heart. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were all more concerned about my mother's feelings than they had been about my physical injuries. I also had to deal with Eliza's escalating desperation. After the fake Instagram account was discovered and reported, she tried reaching out through old mutual friends from high school. Several people contacted me with messages from Eliza about how sorry she was and how much she missed me. One friend, Kelly, actually pushed back when Eliza asked her to intercede. "Eliza, I saw the pictures Hannah posted of her burns," Kelly told her. "You stood there and watched your parents assault your sister over a watch. Why would you think she'd want to talk to you?" Eliza's response, according to Kelly, was telling. "She's always been dramatic. It wasn't that bad, and now she's ruining everyone's life over it." Even after everything that had happened, Eliza still couldn't acknowledge the severity of what had occurred. She was more upset about the consequences than sorry about her actions. During this time, I started therapy to process everything that had happened. I thought I was handling everything well, but my therapist, Dr. Renata Silva, helped me understand that I'd been dealing with a lifetime of emotional abuse and manipulation, not just one isolated incident. "The soup was just the final straw," she explained. "But the pattern of putting Eliza's needs before your basic dignity had been going on for years. That's why you were able to cut them off so completely. You'd been preparing for it emotionally without realizing it." Therapy helped me understand that my calm reaction during the assault wasn't shock, it was clarity. For the first time, I could see the situation exactly as it was, without the fog of family obligation and guilt that usually clouded my judgment. I also learned about something called scapegoat and golden child dynamics in dysfunctional families. I was the scapegoat, expected to be responsible, independent, and self-sacrificing. Eliza was the golden child, coddled, excused, and catered to no matter how poorly she behaved. Understanding these dynamics helped explain why extended family members were so quick to pressure me to forgive and forget. They were used to me being the one who gave in to keep the peace. But I wasn't that person anymore. The civil case was settled out of court in early September, over 9 months after the incident and 2 months after the criminal case concluded. Even though my parents didn't have much liquid money left after legal fees and job losses, they still owned their home and had some remaining retirement investments. I was awarded $45,000 in damages, plus all my legal fees. The settlement process revealed just how desperate their financial situation had become. They'd had to liquidate my dad's 401k early, paying substantial penalties, just to cover their basic living expenses and legal costs. Their retirement plans were completely destroyed. My lawyer told me they'd initially tried to negotiate a much smaller settlement, claiming they couldn't afford more. But when we showed documentation of their assets and reminded them that the alternative was a public trial that would attract even more negative attention, they agreed to the full amount. The most satisfying part was that the settlement included a clause preventing them from discussing the case publicly or disparaging me in any way. If they violated this clause, they'd owe additional damages. This meant Eliza couldn't continue her social media campaign about what a terrible sister I was, and my parents couldn't play the victim to mutual acquaintances. The social consequences continued to unfold throughout the spring and summer. My parents had been members of Grace Community Church for over 20 years, where my mom had been active in the women's ministry and my dad served as an usher. When the assault charges became public knowledge, the church leadership asked them to step back from all volunteer positions. Pastor Williams, who had known our family since I was a teenager, actually reached out to me personally to express his concern and support. He'd always liked me and was horrified by what had happened. "Hannah, I want you to know that what happened to you is completely unacceptable," he told me during a phone call. "I've known your family for years, and I'm shocked by their behavior. Please know that you have my prayers and support." He also mentioned that several church members had approached him asking about the situation, and that the general consensus was overwhelmingly supportive of me and critical of my parents' actions. The loss of their church community was particularly devastating for my mom, who had built much of her social life around church activities. She'd been coordinator of the annual charity drive and had organized the church cookbook fundraiser for 3 years running. Suddenly finding herself persona non grata in a community where she'd invested so much time and energy was a harsh wake-up call. My dad's professional network also continued to shrink. The financial services industry is surprisingly small and gossip travels fast. Word of his involvement in a domestic violence case spread through his professional contacts, making it even harder for him to find new employment. One of his former colleagues, Jim Henderson, actually contacted me through LinkedIn to apologize for my family's behavior. "I worked with your dad for 8 years," Jim wrote. "I always thought he was a stand-up guy, but what he did to you was inexcusable. I wanted you to know that not everyone in his circle supports his actions." Jim also mentioned that several of their mutual professional contacts had been discussing the case and were appalled by Malcolm's behavior toward his own daughter. Meanwhile, Eliza was struggling with her new reality of having to support herself completely. The call center job was demanding and poorly paid, and she had no experience managing a budget or living within her means. She'd never had to think about things like car insurance, phone bills, or groceries because my parents had always handled everything. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd had to move out of her childhood bedroom and into the basement because my parents needed to rent out the upstairs rooms to generate income. She was paying them rent, probably for the first time in her adult life, and was reportedly very unhappy about the arrangement. The acquaintance, our former neighbor Mrs. Kim, told me that Eliza had complained bitterly about having to live like a college student at 26 and blamed me for destroying her stability. "She still doesn't understand that actions have consequences," Mrs. Kim observed. "She thinks this is all happening to her rather than recognizing that she participated in what happened to you." Around this time, I made a decision that felt both practical and symbolic. I used my settlement money to increase the down payment on the house I'd already put an offer on. Instead of taking a larger mortgage, I decided to put more money down up front and reduce my monthly payments. The house I chose was everything I dreamed of: a charming craftsman-style home with original hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen, and a beautiful garden. It was in a neighborhood full of young professionals and small families, the kind of community where people actually knew their neighbors. When I got the keys and walked through my new home for the first time as the owner, I felt an incredible sense of accomplishment and freedom. This was mine, no one could take it away from me, demand I share it, or make me feel guilty for having it. I threw a housewarming party 6 weeks after moving in. The guest list was full of real friends, people who genuinely cared about my well-being and celebrated my successes. Theo helped me host, and seeing him comfortable and happy in our shared space felt like a glimpse of our future together. Several friends commented on how relaxed and confident I seemed compared to how I'd been a year earlier. "You're like a completely different person," my friend Tessa observed. "You seem so much more yourself." She was right. Without the constant stress of managing my family's emotions and expectations, I felt lighter and more authentic. I was rediscovering parts of my personality that had been suppressed for years. Eliza had to get a full-time job for the first time in her adult life because she could no longer rely on my parents' support. She ended up working at a call center for an insurance company, not exactly the creative, flexible lifestyle she'd always imagined. The house went up for sale in early fall. They couldn't afford the mortgage without both parents' previous incomes. Meanwhile, my life got significantly better. Without the constant drama and guilt trips from my family, I was less stressed and more focused at work. I got a promotion in late summer, several months after the court case ended. The raise was substantial enough that I was able to put an offer on a beautiful house, and when the civil settlement came through in September, I used that money to increase my down payment and get an even nicer property than I'd originally planned. I also started dating again. I'd been so wrapped up in family obligations and their constant criticism that I hadn't realized how much they'd been affecting my confidence. Without their voices in my head, I felt more attractive and self-assured. I met Theo at a work conference in May. He's a cybersecurity consultant, smart, funny, and completely independent of any family drama. When I told him the watch story on our third date, he was horrified by my parents' behavior and impressed by how I'd handled it. "So you literally had them arrested over a watch?" he asked. "No, I had them arrested for assault and intimidation. The watch was just what they used to justify it." He's been incredibly supportive, and we're moving in together next month. The best part? I still have the watch. I wear it every single day now. It's become my favorite piece of jewelry, not just because it's beautiful, but because it represents something important: the moment I finally put myself first and refused to be treated badly just because we shared DNA. 8 months after the court case, Eliza tried to reach out through mutual family friends. She wanted to rebuild our relationship and put the past behind us. The message she sent through our cousin basically said she forgave me for overreacting and was ready to move forward. I sent back a simple response: "There's nothing to rebuild. I meant what I said about cutting all ties forever. Our cousin told me Eliza cried when she got my response, but I honestly don't care. She made her choice when she smirked and said she was finally getting what she deserved while I had burning soup dripping from my hair. Last year, I heard through the grapevine that my parents had moved to a different state. Apparently, the social stigma in our hometown became too much, and my dad found a job in Kansas. Eliza went with them since she couldn't afford to stay on her own. I changed my phone number and didn't give it to anyone who might pass it along to them. I've also made it clear to extended family that I don't want updates about them and won't be attending any events where they'll be present. Some relatives have tried to guilt me about holding grudges and family being forever. I shut that down immediately. They chose to assault me rather than let me keep a gift they'd given me, I explain. That's not a grudge. That's a logical response to domestic violence. Usually, that ends the conversation pretty quickly. The funny thing is, I'm happier now than I've been in years. I didn't realize how much emotional energy I was spending on trying to manage their feelings and expectations. Without that constant drain, I have more energy for work, hobbies, friends, and my relationship with Theo. I've also developed much stronger boundaries with everyone in my life. I'm quicker to recognize when people are trying to manipulate or guilt me, and I'm much more willing to walk away from relationships that don't serve me. My friend Camille, who knew my family, said something that really stuck with me: you didn't destroy your family over a watch. Your family destroyed itself because they valued a watch more than your dignity. She's absolutely right. I still wear great-grandmother's watch every day. Sometimes people compliment it, and I tell them it's a family heirloom. I just don't mention which family members I got it from. The inscription on the back says, "To my beloved great-granddaughter, with love always." I like to think great-grandmother would be proud that I stood up for myself and refused to be treated badly. She was a strong, independent woman who built her own business back when that was rare for women. I think she'd understand exactly why I made the choices I did. A few weeks ago, Theo and I were having dinner at a nice restaurant, and he noticed me checking the time on my watch. "You know," he said, "every time I see you look at that watch, you smile a little. It must have really good memories attached." I thought about that for a moment. Actually, it does now. It reminds me of the day I finally learned to put myself first. He raised his wine glass. "To putting yourself first." "To putting yourself first," I agreed, clinking my glass against his. And you know what? I don't regret a single part of my revenge. Not the police report, not the job calls, not the civil suit, and definitely not cutting them out of my life completely. They taught me that biology doesn't make a family, respect, love, and basic human decency do. Since they couldn't provide any of those things, they don't get to be part of my life. I'm still 28, but I'll be 29 next month. I'm successful, happy, and completely free from their drama. I have friends who care about me, a man who loves me, and a beautiful house that's entirely mine. Most importantly, I have self-respect and boundaries that no one gets to cross. The watch still keeps perfect time, by the way. Just like great-grandmother intended. Update: some people have asked what happened with Eliza specifically. She tried to contact me through social media about a year ago with a long message about how she'd grown and changed and realized she'd been immature. She wanted to apologize and rebuild our relationship. I read the entire message, and it was clear she still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She focused on being immature and caught up in wanting nice things, but completely glossed over the part where she smirked while I was being assaulted and said I was finally getting what I deserved. She also mentioned several times how hard things had been for her since the family fell apart and how she'd learned about real struggle now that she had to support herself. Basically, it was a non-apology focused on her own hardships rather than genuine remorse for her actions. I blocked her without responding. Theo asked me if I ever miss having a family, and honestly, I don't. I miss the idea of having a loving, supportive family, but I never actually had that anyway. What I had was a group of people who shared my DNA and expected me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Now I have chosen family, friends who genuinely care about me, Theo and his wonderful family who've welcomed me completely, and co-workers who've become close friends. It's so much better than being related to people who fundamentally don't respect you as a person. The watch is sitting on my nightstand as I type this, and tomorrow I'll put it on again and go to work at a job I love, in a life I've built for myself, surrounded by people who actually care about my well-being. That's worth more than any biological family connection could ever be. TLDR, parents gave me a family heirloom watch for Christmas, then demanded I give it to my spoiled sister. When I refused, my mom poured scalding soup on my head while my dad threatened worse. I had them arrested, sued them, got them fired from their jobs, and cut all contact forever. They lost their house, friends, and reputation while I got promoted, bought my own house, and found love. Still wearing the watch every day.